when my sexuality is connected to my heart, then my body is so much more open and then I want to have sex.
Tarisha Tourok is an trauma-informed relationship and female sexuality therapist, passionate about supporting women and reclaiming the power and beauty of their sexuality. With a couple of postgraduate degrees in counseling and psychotherapy, she's had the privilege of guiding hundreds of incredible women on their journeys to rediscovering their desires, learning how to be an invitation for love and affection, and feeling whole. The result for them is heart-melting and fulfilling love lives. She's trained in women-centered coaching, which means she truly understands the unique challenges and complexities that women face when it comes to their bodies and sexuality. She's designed a holistic approach known as the Sexuality Empowered Radiant Woman Method. This method doesn't just enhance your sex life, it boosts your confidence, helps you feel more radiant no matter what your age, shape, or size, and just lets you shine in your everyday life.
It's really an experience. My whole body starts to vibrate. It's actually my whole body starts to feel a sense of love. And breathing in through your sex center into your heart, breathing out from your heart into your sex center. It's so beautiful to actually keep on feeling your heart being part of that sexual activity.
For a limited time, when you buy my best-selling new release book, you will get a ton of bonuses for free when you take time to leave me an honest review. I want you to get these bonuses. This is only available for a short time period. So if you head over to wanttowantit.com, you're not only going to get all these free bonuses, but you're going to get access to this book where we talk about root causes of low libido. We talk about how to have better sex. We talk about how to get more sex and how to be better at it. So head over to wanttowantit.com. Now let's get going with our episode. Tarisha Tourok is an trauma-informed relationship and female sexuality therapist, passionate about supporting women and reclaiming the power and beauty of their sexuality. With a couple of postgraduate degrees in counseling and psychotherapy, she's had the privilege of guiding hundreds of incredible women on their journeys to rediscovering their desires, learning how to be an invitation for love and affection, and feeling whole. The result for them is heart-melting and fulfilling love lives. She's trained in women-centered coaching, which means she truly understands the unique challenges and complexities that women face when it comes to their bodies and sexuality. She's designed a holistic approach known as the Sexuality Empowered Radiant Woman Method. This method doesn't just enhance your sex life, it boosts your confidence, helps you feel more radiant no matter what your age, shape, or size, and just lets you shine in your everyday life. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another episode on the Libido Lounge. I'm so thrilled to bring a women's embodiment and women's sexuality expert to our show today. And I want to first name before I bring her on that if you're listening to this as a man and you're getting ready to turn it off, I really encourage you not to, because what I have found in my work with couples is that the more we understand each other, the better sex life gets for everybody. So even though today's show is focused on the ladies, I really encourage you men to stay listening to this because you will learn things about how you can support the women in your life become more radiant, more embodied, more heart-filled, and more sexually alive in their bodies, which is something that benefits the entire couple. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Tarisha. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me here. It's a joy.
It is a joy to be with you. And we're going to get right into, what is heart-melting sex? Why is this important after 40? And see where our conversation takes us. But just tell us, your work is super unique and really supporting, 40 plus, but also in really supporting people with having a different type of sexual experience. Why is this important to you? How did you get here?
Because growing, being younger and not really feeling that sex was fulfilling me and feeling like sex is maybe for my partner, for my husband. And then I went all around the world, studied all sorts of things. And what I found out is actually when my sexuality is connected to my heart, then my body is so much more open, and then I want to have sex rather than try to avoid it. And that's what I love teaching women, that actually, what if we start loving sex, as much as men do? Because quite often in a couple, I know there are some women who love sex, yeah, but there are a majority, I think, of women that feel like, well, it's for him, or I need to do it to keep peace in the family. And what I realized, when we connect our sex to our heart, we start to love it, crave it, want it, and it benefits everyone.
Okay, so I think you already got the men's attention because absolutely, right? I see that in my work as well, that there's, it's stereotypical, but it's a very common stereotype that women are not as interested. And I think there is something huge to be said with exactly that, with maybe not being in their bodies, maybe not being in their hearts, and just showing up to their sexual life from an obligatory standpoint. So then, is that how you would describe then this whole heart melting sex, or how would you describe what heart melting sex is, which is part of what you teach?
Well, for me, it's really an experience of when I'm with my partner. Yeah, we're like making love in the body. We're making more love in the world, and it's like my whole body starts to vibrate. So it's not just focused on my sex center. It's actually my whole body starts to feel a sense of love. So rather than just pleasure, rather than sexual excitement, but it's that sense of like expansion, sense of beauty, sense of something deeper, something bigger. And yeah, it feels like my heart starts to open. And sometimes I ask him, can you penetrate my heart? And with that intention, it just feels like, oh yeah. And it becomes quite, an experience of aliveness, of fullness, and making more love. That's what I feel like. We're making more love, physically making more love in the world.
So then, would you describe heart melting sex? Is this like oriented to women? Because in many ways, women oftentimes, and this is again not always true, but in many ways, women experience much more of a need for like an emotional connection with sex. Like, do you find that this helps with that emotional connection, and that's part of what's opening women up more?
Well, it has to start with emotional connection rather than sex and then emotional connection, because that's more, again, we're kind of talking in general, yeah, but that's more how men go into emotional connection. They feel sexual connection, and then they feel more intimate emotional connection. But what I also find is that after 40, men's hormones change as well, and they actually start to want more emotional connection. So it's not just about women. I think when we're younger, we're more kind of mechanical and more that kind of pleasure-oriented sex is good for men as well and for women. But when we get older, men start to crave the emotional connection as well. So we're kind of after 40, we're in a really good place for women and men, because we start to match more, where sex becomes more heart-centered rather than just the physicality of it. And quite often for men as well, they might have sexual dysfunctions, right? If there is no heart-to-heart connection. So that becomes more important as we age, which is such good news for ladies.
Okay, so that kind of finds a little bit about like what heart opening sex is, or heart melting sex, and a little bit maybe even about who it's for. But can you give us like an action step, especially for the ladies, but also for the men listening? Like if people are interested in starting to have this more expansive sex, like where do people even start?
So there, first of all, paying attention, yeah, what kind of sex are you having now? Is there heart in it? Yeah. Or is it just mechanical? Are you just trying to kind of do the actions? And then I really invite, my foundational practice for women is breathing. We're breathing from our sex center to our heart, and we start connecting, yeah, our heart, and then breathing out from our heart to our sex center. And when we start really connecting, you can put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and really in your body start to feel that connection. Are these places connected for me? Or is there a big separation? And as you start paying attention and you start breathing, yeah, breathing in through your sex center into your heart, breathing out from your heart into your sex center, noticing, are there any blocks here? Does it flow? Can I even think about my sexuality connected to my heart? So really becoming curious about it. And then, of course, there are like a lot of things we might need to do to get to that connection, because there could be past traumas, right? There could be the disconnect from our heart. There could be guilt, shame that we need to go through before we can really start feeling that connection. But the breathing practice is quite powerful, just simply breathing from your sex center into your heart, breathing out from your heart down into your sex center. I don't know, like that's a very big question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And well, in thinking about that too, like I'm curious from like that initial action step for people because I'm like very into like let's take action, you know. And in that initial action step, are you generally recommending people that do that during sexual intimacy, or is that in your experience like a private thing? Like, okay, this has nothing to do with sex as far as the actual act, and more just like part of like a meditative practice they do outside of the realms with their partner.
It's both, because we need to have a practice before we go into sexual intimacy, because that can be too stimulating, too overwhelming. So I really ask women 2 minutes a day, if you can actually put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, somewhere close to a sex center that feels comfortable, and feel into that connection, breathe into that. And then when you're with your partner, you will remember to do that. Yeah. And if you ask your partner, you can breathe together, just 5 minutes of breathing together before doing anything else. Yeah. And then during intercourse, during self-pleasuring, during, mutual pleasuring, it's so beautiful to actually keep on feeling your heart being part of that sexual activity. But it's very important to do it outside as well. Yeah, that's where we start. Because if we just go into sexual activity, it's like, oh, it's too much, and it's difficult to create that flow in the body.
So you mentioned shame, right? And that's something that I think comes up a lot with the topic of sex. So if somebody is like experiencing like they're breathing and they're moving their breath from their genitals to their heart and back down, and all of a sudden they have some sort of like shame rush over them, or maybe they just find themselves like checking out and they can't even stay in the presence of their body with this exercise, which to me is always a potential indicator of shame. Do you have any recommendations for what people do if like they try this exercise? It's like, wow, I'm like realizing I have a lot of shame around my genitals. Like, what do people do in that scenario? Just a quick reminder, if you've not, head over to wanttowantit.com to get your copy of my new best-selling book and leave reviews in order to get about $200 worth of free bonuses from myself, as well as gifts from sexual health experts around the world. You're going to want to get this to get to the root causes of low libido, solve desire mismatch, communicate about sex better, improve pelvic pain, erectile dysfunction, and so much more. Now let's get back to our episode.
The first step, and I always teach that I teach 7 sacred sexuality keys. One of them is pause, which is so important. When you feel that, it's so important to pause, because then you create safety for yourself. You don't override, you don't push. Yeah, keep on kind of being there, but actually being absent. Yeah. So it's important to pause and actually, okay, something is happening right now. And that's where it's important to communicate to your partner. Actually, something is happening right now. Maybe it's not about you, but something is happening inside. Can we please pause and just stay with that? And the ninja, I guess, technique afterwards, yeah. And you might need some time to get there, actually, to be able to express it. Maybe through sound, maybe through movement. Like last night, I was teaching and then I came home and I felt frustrated and irritated. And I could bring that into sexual intimacy, and I could, scream and roar, and it felt so exciting, but he was able to hold me in that. So there needs to be, okay, can we actually do that together? And you might take a lot of steps to get to that point. But shame is usually, it freezes us. And we can't act, we can't talk. So bring a bit of movement, pausing actually a little bit of movement and noticing what is the emotion behind that. Yeah. And there could be sadness, there could be hurt, there could be anger, and connecting to those emotions, and in some way, shape or form, trying to run that energy through the body rather than kind of freezing and shutting down. Yeah. Even moving one finger is like, there is shame, and moving one finger and keep on breathing. And of course, your partner needs to be up to it. You need to kind of talk about it. You need to be able to express that with your partner there. Or maybe you need someone else to help you. But when we go into shame, it's important to have someone else there with us, because shame is such an isolating emotion that we need someone else to help us through that. Again, a big question.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah. Yeah. I like to go deep for sure. But thank you. I appreciate that, the idea of having a partner that can walk us through that and be there with us through that. And it is a big question, but I do think shame is something, especially when we're talking about sexuality. I think more people, in my opinion, like experience this more than people we even realize. There's so many different ways that we are shamed around our sexuality throughout our whole life, oftentimes. And even if it's just a silly passing comment by a very kind lover and we take it the wrong way, sometimes our body holds shame. So I think it's a really important thing. I know you work with women over 40 a lot. So my curiosity is like, with this whole practice on heart opening sex, like, do you find that it's like particularly important for women after 40? Is it just more that it's for all women and that just happens to be your focus?
It's important for all women, and I sometimes work with 20-year-olds, and it's so delightful to work with them. But what I find in our younger years, we're so focused on bringing family, achieving careers, that we just don't have that time and focus on ourselves, on our sexuality. And women are so good, and I know we had to be so good at focusing on everyone else. And I find that on the after 40 women, like, oh, what about me? I want my experience to be good. Yeah. And I know, of course, for everyone, it's just so amazing to have that emotional connection and intimacy. But yeah, as we grow older, we tend to start to find time for that and think like, I don't want to have mechanical sex anymore. When in younger years, it could be exciting, it could be really exciting, just the physicality of it. But as we go older, something shifts where that emotional connection becomes more important. Yeah. And of course, there are variations. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So can you give us, I know sometimes you talk about 3 keys to awakening the power of our sexuality. So can you tell us about what those 3 keys are?
So I talk about like 7 keys, yeah. And the first step is actually to really notice, where am I at? Yeah. What's actually going on? And that's that pause. If I take a breath, what is going on with me? Yeah. And maybe journaling about it. How I feel about my sexuality, how I experience it, what works for me, what doesn't work. So you become really aware. That's the pause where you can take a deep breath and actually notice, okay, this is where I'm at. Yeah. And then the next step is to start connecting to our body and start to really drop into the body, because quite often women, and I see it kind of, we live up here somewhere in our heads, but actually coming down into the body, because sexuality happens in the body. So coming down, and you can do that through dancing, through yoga, through breath work, whatever works for you, but really coming back inside yourself, dropping inside. And, the massages, whatever it is. And then when you drop, right, you know where you're at, you drop into your body, and then practicing sacred sexuality practices. And the breath work is part of it, being by yourself with your partner, really dropping deeper into your sexuality through breath work, through, you can call it meditation, yeah, you can call it kind of setting up the scene, but really creating something that this is something special, that it's not just, we just wake up in the morning, we quickly have sex and that's it, but creating this deeper environment where you are supported in going deeper with your partner, where you can share deeply, more emotionally and sexually. Yeah. So first pause, then connecting to your body, and then creating those spaces, circumstances, environment where you can go deeper into that really different space of more sacred sexuality rather than the mechanical and disconnected sex, which can be fun as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how, like, do you recommend, like, do you have a strategy on how people like create the environment? Like you were saying, create the environment for this. Like, what does that, from a standpoint of really having the best environment to be able to begin to feel safe, to do this breath work, to begin to awaken themselves more deeply to this heart-centered sex? Like, what's required of that environment? I imagine it depends, but can you give a little bit of like insight as to what you have found to be the most helpful for that creation?
It really depends. And I've got my sexual desire blueprints, and it's 5 different blueprints. And depending on which blueprint you belong to, you're gonna need a different thing. For some women, and I've got this part of that being the adventurist, for me, being in a new environment, somewhere it's like it's new, it's exciting, maybe in the bush, where it's a bit like, whoa, there's a bit of sense of adventure, newness. For me, that's what brings more of that, For some women, if they're more of a nurturer, they might need to be in their house so they know they're safe. Everything needs to be clean, everything kind of, there are no distractions. For this spiritual blueprint, where then we need to have candlelight, maybe some spiritual music, maybe have a meditation beforehand. So it really depends which blueprint you're in. And what's important here, it's really to find out, rather than having a script, this is what we're supposed to have, kind of, I guess there's a more of a vanilla, right, description of how it should be. It's not that for everyone. So you need to find out what actually turns me on. What kind of environment do I need? Maybe being on the beach, maybe in the sauna. Different people need different things. So don't think of yourself like, oh, I need something different and there's something wrong with me. Actually, you are different, we're all different, we're all unique, and it's beautiful.
So then what is your process on how to help people find their blueprint?
I've got a quiz. It's just a 5-question quiz where people can just, choose the answers, and then they understand which blueprint they are. And it's so empowering, I think, because there's so much talk of the normality, kind of, this is how it should be, the myth of normal, as Gabor Mate talks about it. And there's nothing, I don't want to say normal about us, but we're so unique, And to find out actually what's important for you, just so empowering. And then you feel like, oh, this is just what I need. Because for some people, I've got another blueprint, which is a passion seeker. They actually need a sense of passion. That's the most important thing. Candles, everything doesn't matter. And that's where sometimes for those people, sex after arguments is such a turn on. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And make sure, everybody, I will make sure that I have that quiz from Tarisha, and we'll make sure to include that in the show notes. And we're going to conclude part 1, everybody. Remember, in the show notes, you can find out how to get access to part 2. In part 2, we're coming back with Tarisha, and we're talking about how to embrace the changing body with age, and really talking a little bit more around how to work with our sexuality as we change, and what changes, and how to embrace this time as perhaps the sexiest time of life. Hopefully the sexiest time of life so far. And we're going to talk about all of that and more in part 2. But I will definitely put the quiz in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we name today in part 1 on how people get a hold of you and your other offerings?
Yeah, I have it's a free mini course, and I offer 5 practices on how to reclaim your sexual confidence. And that's where I kind of help women to work through the shame piece. You just do these practices by yourself, and you start to feel more coming back more into your body, removing that inner critical voice and releasing the shame. So that's, it's a 5-day course, and you just do 15 minutes a day, and women get so much out of it. There can be a lot of shifts, but it's all in the practice. What's important is not just you listening here. It's like, oh, you understand it. Actually coming back to the body and practicing, that's what's really important.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll definitely include that in the show notes as well. And I just want to thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope everybody will take the first step, start doing the pause work, start doing the breath work. Go get these 2 free gifts, the quiz, so you learn more about your turn-ons, and you're more in your environment that creates that sexiness. And then also her mini course, her Reclaim Your Sexual Confidence mini course as well. So all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for joining me, Tarisha. And thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode on The Lounge. We'll see you all real soon. Ciao for now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Libido Lounge. Please don't keep me a secret. Please share this with your friends. You can find me on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as how to work with me at mylibidodoc.com.